Have you ever had that feeling, like just wanting to disappear, not in a I want to die kind of way,
right,
but more like wanting to hit the reset button on everything?
Yeah.
Like in this Philanautica video, there's this awesome analogy about a Facebook profile where if you log out, everything just vanishes.
Yeah.
Your connections, your posts, your whole history.
I love that.
It's like poof, gone. Ever feel that pull?
Definitely. I think that's something a lot of people can relate to. In fact, the video we're looking at, the desire to disappear from the Philanautica YouTube channel,
right,
it actually dives deep into this universal feeling. It's not just a random thought or anything. It's this longing for a completely different setting for our lives.
Yeah. And what I find so cool about this video is that it uses all these different perspectives, like from philosophy to literature to real life examples.
Exactly.
To get to the bottom of why we have this urge to just press that cosmic undo button.
Yeah, and it's not just like wanting to escape problems, although sometimes it can definitely feel that way,
Oh, absolutely. Like when you're stuck in a dead-end job or facing rejection after rejection, it's easy to fantasize about just wiping the slate clean.
And the video really hones in on that. It talks about how for people in the middle and lower classes especially, those everyday struggles can make that desire to disappear feel super intense.
Totally. Just a break from it all, But here's the thing that really blew my mind.
Yeah.
The video brings up Leo Tolstoy, the famous author.
Oh, yeah.
Successful, career, family, money, the whole 9 yards. But guess what?
What?
Even he felt this pull to disappear.
I mean, you would think having all that would be enough, right?
Exactly. He even had suicidal thoughts at one point, which actually the video talks about in more detail if you want to check it out.
Right.
So it's not just about external circumstance, There's something much deeper going on here.
Yeah, there's definitely more to it than just, oh, my life is hard, so I want to disappear. It seems like this desire taps into something fundamental about the human condition.
And the video tackles that head on by looking at philosophical ideas like those of Arthur Schopenhauer.
Schopenhauer, yeah. He had a pretty, how do I put it? Pretty bleak outlook on human existence.
Yeah, tell me about it.
He basically believed that life is just this endless cycle of wanting stuff and then being dissatisfied with it.
Like that feeling of, I'll be happy when I get that new phone.
Yeah.
But then you get it and it's like...
Yeah, and then you just want something else.
Exactly.
Schopenhauer thought this was just built into us, like this will to live that drives us to survive and seek pleasure. But he also thought that ultimately it leads to pain because we can never truly be satisfied.
So it's like our very nature is to always want more. And that wanting is what makes us unhappy. Almost like how consumerism keeps us constantly chasing the next shiny thing. Makes you wonder if our whole system is built on that.
It's a pretty thought-provoking idea, isn't it? And it kind of makes that longing to disappear make more sense, It's like
maybe if we just stopped wanting, stopped striving, then we wouldn't feel so much pain.
Right. That was basically Schopenhauer's conclusion, that not existing might actually be preferable to this constant struggle. But then the video moves on to Friedrich Nietzsche and his famous statement, God is dead.
Now that's where things get really interesting. God is dead.
Yeah.
What does that have to do with this urge to disappear that we've been talking about?
Well, Nietzsche wasn't talking about a literal death. He was talking about the death of traditional sources of meaning.
Like religion.
Exactly. He thought that in the modern world, those old systems of belief were losing their power. And without them, people would start to feel like life was arbitrary and meaningless.
Like if there's no grand plan, no purpose to it all.
Then what's the point of all the struggles and the suffering, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where nihilism comes in.
Right. Nihilism is the belief that life has no inherent meaning or value. And that can be a really tough pill to swallow, It's like realizing that you're just a tiny speck in this vast, indifferent universe.
And all your problems and your accomplishments, they kind of shrink in comparison.
Exactly. And the video talks about how that feeling can be a big driver behind this desire to just disappear. So how did literature explore this whole existential crisis, yearning for nothing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we can't talk about nihilism without bringing up Russian literature.
Oh, absolutely. The video highlights Dostoevsky's Demons, which is also sometimes called The Possessed. The characters in that book are so entrenched in nihilistic beliefs that it drives them to some pretty extreme acts, including suicide.
Like taking nihilism to its ultimate conclusion.
Exactly. And then there's the Underground Man from Notes from Underground, another Dostoevsky class. He's the super isolated, despairing guy who famously says he even tried to become an insect.
Tried to become an insect.
Yeah, but then he says he couldn't even do that right because he was too conscious.
Wow, too conscious. That's pretty deep.
It is. He's basically saying that he feels so alienated and worthless that he doesn't even deserve to exist, trapped in his own head, you know? And it's interesting how both Schopenhauer's emphasis on dissatisfaction and Nietzsche's death of God kind of converge on this idea of lacking meaning, which can fuel that feeling of wanting to disappear.
So like those ideas lay the groundwork for this intense feeling of emptiness.
Yeah. And then the video brings up another fascinating example, Kafka's The Metamorphosis.
Oh yeah, the guy who wakes up as a giant bug. How does that tie into this desire to disappear?
Well, Gregor Samsa, the main character, goes through this total transformation, right? And it forces him to confront some really tough questions.
Like, why me? And what's the point of all this?
Exactly. He becomes isolated, feels like a burden, and gradually starts to embrace nihilistic beliefs.
Like his physical transformation mirrors a kind of internal breakdown, a loss of meaning and purpose.
And in the end, he just gives up on life. He stops eating, stops caring whether he lives or dies. Pretty heavy stuff.
Definitely. So where do we go from there? The video introduces us to Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher.
Ah, Sartre. He was all about freedom and responsibility.
But how does his philosophy connect to this feeling of wanting to just check out of reality?
Well, Sartre believed that life doesn't have any inherent. We're born into this world without a purpose, and it's up to us to create our own. He called it being condemned to be free.
Condemned to be free. That sounds kind of paradoxical.
It is, but it highlights the weight of that responsibility. Sartre himself struggled with feelings of emptiness and isolation, which is reflected in his work, like his book Nihilism. So even though he championed this idea of creating your own meaning, he wrestled with that feeling of existential dread.
So even the guy who said we have the power to create meaning felt lost sometimes.
Exactly. And it's not just Sartre. Remember Tolstoy.
Yeah, the guy who had it all but still felt that pull to disappear.
Right. Even though he was super successful, he went through a major crisis later in life. He talks about it in his book, A Confession. He felt like nothing had meaning. Not his fame, not his family, nothing.
So it's like no matter who you are or what you achieve, this feeling can still creep in.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. And the video then shifts to a real-world example of how nihilism can play out. It mentions Sergei Nechayev, this radical Russian nihilist.
What do you do?
He basically believed in tearing down society by any means necessary. His life was filled with paranoia and despair, and he eventually died in prison.
So that feeling of meaninglessness can actually lead to some pretty destructive outcomes.
It definitely can. And the video also connects this to what was happening in Europe after the World Wars. There was this widespread disillusionment, a feeling that life had lost its meaning. Suicide rates went up, which kind of echoed Nietzsche's warnings about a crisis of meaning in the modern world.
It's like that feeling of emptiness got amplified on a societal scale. But the video also points out that not everyone reacts to life's difficulties in the same way, right?
Right. Some people have a higher tolerance for suffering than others. And then there's the concept of anti-natalism.
Anti-Natalism.
Yeah, it's the belief that it's morally wrong to bring children into a world full of suffering. The video even mentions this guy who sued his parents for giving birth to him. And there's that quote from Heinrich Heine, "Sleep is good, death is better. But of course, the best would have been never to have been born at all."
Whoa, that's taking it to the extreme. But the video clarifies that wanting to disappear isn't the same as anti-natal.
Exactly. It's more about wanting to escape the current reality, not necessarily wishing you'd never existed in the first place.
Really?
So what causes this desire to disappear?
Yeah, what's the psychology behind it?
Well, the video suggests it often comes from mental breakdowns, where overthinking and anxiety overwhelm your imagination. And imagination is interesting because it can both contribute to and relieve anxiety.
So, like, you can imagine all these worst-case scenarios, but then you can also imagine escaping them, which provides some temporary relief.
Right. It's kind of a double-edged sword. And depending on how you handle it, this desire to disappear can either lead you down a path of sadness and resignation.
Oh, no.
Or it can motivate you to make changes in your life.
I mean, sometimes hitting rock bottom can be the thing that pushes you to finally turn things around.
Absolutely. And speaking of coping mechanisms, the video does touch upon some unhealthy ways people try to deal with this feeling.
Yeah, like turning to drugs or alcohol.
Right. And as the video points out, that obviously can lead to a whole host of problems, both for the individual and their loved one. But thankfully, the video doesn't leave us on a completely bleak.
There's hope, right?
Absolutely. It shifts to some more constructive perspectives. It introduces this idea from Simone Weil, who said, "Man is not made for the purpose of being satisfied. He is made for the purpose of longing."
So instead of seeing dissatisfaction as a bad thing,
we should embrace it as a fundamental part of what makes us human.
Like it's the fuel that drives us to grow and learn and create.
Exactly. And the video also reminds us to appreciate The basic things we often take for granted, like our health and our mind. Those are the foundations for a life. It also talks about the importance of building something, whether it's a business, a family, or a creative project.
There's definitely something fulfilling about creating something, putting your energy into something bigger than yourself.
Right. And then there's that quote from Dostoevsky, "Beauty will save the world." But the video gives it a specific interpretation.
Yeah, it's not talking about superficial beauty. It's about the beauty that can be found in enduring suffering.
Like the beauty of resilience, of transformation, of facing your challenges head on. And that's something that a lot of Dostoevsky's characters embody.
It's like through their struggles, they discover a deeper kind of beauty, a beauty that's rooted in compassion and forgiveness.
Exactly. And then the video wraps up by offering some practical steps to take.
Okay, what kind of advice does it give?
It encourages you to try new things, step outside your comfort zone, and see failure as a learning opportunity. Basically, it's about embracing the journey with all its ups and downs. And it ends with a quote from Henry Ford. "Life is a series of experiences, each one of which makes us bigger, even though sometimes it is hard to realize this."
So it's a reminder that even the tough times are part of our growth.
Yeah, and that by focusing on learning and experiencing, we can find a deeper kind of satisfaction.
So to wrap up our deep dive today, we've explored this feeling of wanting to disappear from all these different angles. From philosophy to literature to real-life examples, we've seen how this desire can stem from a sense of meaninglessness, dissatisfaction, and the challenges of modern life. But we've also seen that there's hope.
Right. We can find meaning in creating, in connecting, and embracing the journey.
It's about finding beauty in the struggle and remembering that even the toughest times can make us stronger.
Absolutely. So as you go about your day, think about this. With all these different perspectives in mind, what small step can you take to engage with life in a new way, to build something meaningful, to find your own way of logging in to your existence?
And if you're struggling with this feeling, remember that you're not alone.
Reach out, talk to someone, explore different ideas. There's always hope.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.